All right. Hello. It's Kerri here. I'm just waiting for everything to pop up in front of me, which is looking good. And it's Tuesday again. So welcome to Tuesday chat. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. If you can't, just let me know, of course. Just getting everything set up here. That's working okay. There's so many things to keep an eye on, honestly. All right. So, like I said, if you can hear me, all right, great. Thanks, Deb. Good to know. All right. So today's Tuesday chat, I was going to talk about the 5 essential techniques for drawing in realism. I thought it would be a good one to go through, because if you follow me, you probably like drawing animals and you probably also like drawing in realism. So I thought it might be a handy one. Okay. Hi, guys. Hi, Di and Helene as well. Awesome. Okay. So let me just, I'm going to get my notes as usual. I'm going to share my screen a little bit just to show you a couple of images so you can understand what I'm talking about. So, well, I'll be you'll have to bear with me swapping back and forth between the screen and not. We just got to make sure I've got everything there open, ready to share. Okay. So and like I said, as I always say, make sure to put in any comments or questions as we're going. I'll keep checking the chat. Hi, Lee, and Idetta here as well. Awesome. Okay, so let me find my thing there. All right, so 5 most important techniques for realism. This is what I feel, but I think it's just general. If you're drawing in realism, these are really important. Okay, so number 1, and I think is the most important thing for realism, is to know your values. Anyone in my membership always know I always talk about values all the time. So value refers to the lightness or darkness of a color. And that can also be in grayscale as well. And it is essential for creating depth and form and a sense of realism in any painting. So hold on, just let me move that there. So the reason it's so important to capture the accurate values. So I think value gives it that 3-dimensional look, which is what we're sort of after in realism. And I also think that's what sets a painting apart from a photo, because we can push those values and it really makes the painting looks like it's coming forward, whereas a photo can appear a bit flat. And even if your colors are slightly off, as long as you've got your values correct, then the form will still look realistic. So a common quote is value does all the work, but color gets all the glory. Okay, so I wanted to share, we were doing a Highland cow in the membership, and we changed the colors but we kept the values. We were concentrating on the values, so that by keeping those values the same, then it didn't matter what color you do it in. So you could I did mine quite colorful. I'll share my screen in a sec, but you could do yours all in yellow if you wanted, and it would still achieve the same effect. Hold on, let me just get this up so you can see what I'm talking about. I should have had these in order, but anyway. Hold on, let me share my screen. So many buttons to press to share a screen. Share. Okay. So this is the Highland cow I was just mentioning. So even though the colors are all over the place here, they're a bit out there, they're not regular colors of a Highland cow, of course. But it still works because I've kept the values in the right area. Okay, so the lights, say on his nose there, they're lighter. The top of his head's a bit lighter. So they're your highlights, and then your shadows, which sort of are in the ears, around the eye, under the chin. So they're the darkest areas, the shadows. And then the midtones we can kind of go a bit crazy on. But I just wanted to, hold on, I've just got to figure out where it is. So this was the original image. Okay. So you can see that's a standard Highland cow color. And what I did, and what is a good tip if you're not sure of values, is you can posterize the image and turn it to grayscale. So, but I just want to show you this. So you can see here under the horns is dark, just sort of as the ear meets the head there is dark, sort of under the fur there's dark, under the chin there is dark. Let me just try and go back. There we go. And what I do to make life easier for me and all my students is I posterize and turn it to grayscale. So posterizing, there are some apps I think that are available, but I do it in Photoshop. And what posterize does, it breaks it down. You can tell it how many values to break it down into, more or less. So I think I broke this one down into about 6 or 7. But you can, it's just an easier way if you're going to be doing this in different colors. So this is the reference image we worked in. We didn't want to be distracted by the actual real colors of the cow. So you're best to turn it to grayscale. And then you should be able to see in here posterizing. So you can see there's sort of sharper lines. So on the horn, it's like got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different values. And it just makes it a little bit easier. You can see in the darks, hopefully you can see there's a couple of different values in there, and it really shows where the darkest darks are. So like it was just under the chin, the bottom of the horns, either side of the eye sort of thing, inside the ears. Okay, so that's, just let me stop sharing for a second just so I can get back to where I was. So that's one way to see your values really well. Let me just, I gotta keep checking contents. Oh, hi Susan, Jackie. Midnight in the UK. Wow. Hi Christy. Rhonda's on, Susan's on. Yeah, Susan, that cow's so cool. Sorry, I keep getting sidetracked. Let me get back to my notes. So that's what, like, you can see, you can, as long as your values are right, it doesn't matter what color you do it in, it will still work. So that's why I think values are so important. Hold on, and also another thing with values, of course, is your highlights, your midtones, and your shadows. I just want to share this one. I'm just trying to figure out. Yep. Okay, so part of values, of course, is being able to see your highlights and midtones and all of that sort of gear. So let me, again, I just wanted to show, this is just a photo. It's not a drawing. This one's a photo of a leopard. And it's one we did do this as a white on black, but it was a good one to see. If you want to really focus on values and learning them, find a reference image where the sun's hitting the animal, so you can see those different values easier. So of course, as the sun's coming from the left on this one across, you can see the light is the highlights on that left-hand side. And then your midtones are what, we'll talk about midtones a bit more, but midtones are essentially the actual color of the item or the animal, whatever it is you're drawing. So the true color without any light or dark on it. light highlights or shadows on it, the midtones are kind of the true color. So in this case with the leopard, so as the light's coming on the left side, so that's where your highlights will be. So it'll be brighter. Your midtones would be sort of where the animals sort of side onto the sun, so it's not actually hitting it. And then your darks, your shadows, of course, are where the light's not hitting it at all. So the right-hand side in this case will be the darkest area. So that's the shadows. Okay, so that's something you do need to, if you're going to be really concentrating on your values, of course, you need to know what to look for. And it's easiest to break them down into highlights, midtones, shadows. Okay, but I'll mention that a bit more further on. So that's values. So that's number one, I think, is the most important. Some people might disagree, but for me, if you get your values right, you're, 50% there, or even 90% there, as you could see in that cow picture. Okay, then another one for realism, of course, this is what we're talking about here. Texture is a really important one, and that's what will make it look like, whether it's soft or whether it's a hard edge, whether it's shiny, whether it's like rusty and rugged like a rock or something. So texture is really important, and it refers to the surface quality of the subject. So like I said, whether it's soft fur, smooth feathers, or rough skin. So like an elephant skin, of course, is going to be completely different texture to a feather, say, or an eye. Like I always try and make an eye. Eye has a lot of texture in the eyeball. We try and make that, even though it sometimes has a lot of detail, we try and make it look smooth. And then as we work out, like around the skin of the eye, usually has a little bit of texture. And then as we move out even further, we get the fur strokes. So there's like quite a few different textures in there. And getting those right is what will really help with your realism. And also because most animals, especially in wildlife art, have their own distinct textures, you need to make sure you convey those so it's believable as well. So some techniques for texture, of course, is layering. So multiple layers of pastel or paint to create the illusion of the depth in the fur and feathers. So again, we'll come back to, especially with feathers. When I'm doing feathers, I usually do one at a time. But your values are really important there as well, because as a feather goes under the one above, it sort of gets that shadow from the one above. So it's always sort of darker in that area. Again, depending on how the light is hitting it. There's so many things you have to think about, of course. But so value and texture then plays a part, and making sure when you're doing your feathers, I always make sure, even though they're quite smooth, I always run my strokes with my pencil in the direction of those, the lines in the feather. If I went side to side and my feather was sort of facing down, then even if you're trying to get it fairly smooth, you still want to be able to see some of those line work in that to really make it look like, how a feather has like individual little strokes in it, if you know what I'm talking about. By running your pencil the same way as those will help to create that texture. Okay. And then of course you're choosing what type of pastel, what what tool you're using to help create that texture as well. So say if I'm doing a really rough rock or something, or a tree branch is a good one, I just use sticks. I very rarely will use a pencil, depending on the size, but if it's a decent size, just sticks and no blending at all. And that creates a really good rough texture. Whereas if I wanted it smooth, like say on an eye, I would use my pencils, and I'll even glaze over the top to really sort of get it blended a bit nicer to try and give it that smoother look. You can also stipple, of course, so doing little dots. Short fur, of course, is pretty much little dots, especially as fur comes towards you. You're not getting the full strokes. you're just getting the little sort of shorter fur bits, scales, all that sort of stuff. So there's so many textures in wildlife art, but it's a really important one to try and master along with the values. I do have a photo here. This one here. This was, if you've been with me for a while, you'll know that this was a free a challenge week we did, and it was all about the different it was called the Safari Challenge, and it was about the different textures, different animal elements, I think I was calling it. So like you've got leopard fur there in the top left, and then the lemur eye, of course, and you can see in the eye, I don't know if zooming in is going to change your view, but the eyeball itself is quite smooth. Even though there's detail there, it looks glassy because it's smooth. And then as we come around to the skin around the eye, we've got a little bit of sort of stippling in that, bit rougher texture. And then we come into the fur. And then, of course, we've got elephant skin, which is crazy detailed and textured. And elephant skin especially, you need to pay close attention to your values of where the light, because the way the light is hitting. So there's a lot of highlights and shadows as each wrinkle, anything wrinkly, because as the wrinkle goes in, of course, it goes into a shadow area, but as it comes out, it's going to have the sun on it, so it's highlighted. And then feathers, of course, are a lot smoother, but we still want some detail on those. Okay, so I've got it's such a pain to get back to where I was. So yeah, so texture's a big one. All right, I'm just checking the comments. Paul, you're having trouble with the cow and the frog nose. Okay. Just shoot me a message later on if you need any help with that. Okay, where's my notes there? Okay, number 3, proportion and placement. So getting the proportions of the animal right ensures that the subject is recognizable and anatomically correct. And it's really important because if you've got everything else perfect, like the values and the textures and the colors, if the proportions are off, then the whole painting will feel wrong. And it is a feeling, like straight away, you'll know exactly that that's wrong. And it is a feeling you get. You just, there's something that's not quite right. And some artists use that as a purpose to make a viewer feel awkward. So, but as a wildlife artist, we don't want our viewers to feel awkward and look at something and think, oh, that's not right. Actually, a good example for me was when I was at the Maryborough Art Show, their yearly exhibition at Gattaca's Art Space. It was a beautiful sculpture. This lady does ceramic sculpture, and it was of a sausage dog. And when I love the colors, and it was beautiful, and you could tell she knows her stuff. She's really, really good at doing sculpture, but it looked cute to start with, but then you started looking at it and something didn't seem right. It just seemed strange. And then as you look closer, the whole sausage dog, each section of it was made up of a baby part. So it's I think she said its body was the thigh. I think its feet were arms and baby hands. She'd broken it right down, and I can't remember what the tail, I think the tail was a little arm with a hand on the end. And I just thought, oh my God, I couldn't even, it was just really creepy to me. But it sold straight away and everyone was raving about it. And it was beautiful, but it was something when you looked at it, you could tell that it just wasn't quite right. And it was a great talking point. So great story, all of that. So that's why it sold, of course. And the work was executed brilliantly. But that's what I'm saying, where some people like to push the boundaries and have art like that. Whereas to me, if I'm doing a really nice animal painting, I want people to love it and not feel awkward with it at all. So of course we come down with our proportions. This is where the good old debate about how to get your initial sketch down. So whether you trace your reference image and use a line art, whether you grid, whether you use a projector, whether you use a scale tool, totally up to you. I don't care how you do it, but try and get it accurate. You can freehand it quite a few times, maybe sketch it in your sketchbook until you get it right if you want to freehand. And then once you've got your sketch right, then you can scan that and blow it up to whatever size you need. But really, really important, make sure you get that sketch right. So I was gonna just share. Just let me share the screen again. Sorry. All this screen sharing. This one. I found a photo online. Oh, hold on. Oh my God. There. I'll get there eventually. Okay, I found this photo online from Munchkin May is the artist. And it was just a really good example of proportions and getting them right. So on the left here, this was like, it was a before and after kind of image, but you can see the difference. And the one on the left, like you can tell it's a rabbit and it's kind of nearly there. But when you compare it to one on the right, and you can see the head is in the same direction, so you can really see just the eye is a bit, it's got to be a little bit more turned. She's got a little bit forward facing on the left, whereas in the right it's turned to the right angle. And your values come into play here. See on top of the head and under that ear, by having that darker, it's making it recede more and making it look like it's going into the shadow there. Whereas the values on the left are all the same throughout, which makes the head look kind of flat. A little bit, again, the value underneath the chin. But just the proportions of the ear, the way the head's turned, all of that, just being a little bit out can really make a huge difference. So that's why I'd say the one on the left, she probably freehanded. And as she's gotten better, she could have freehanded the one on the right as well, or she may have used a tracing like a line art to get those proportions correct to start with. But it's so important to do that. And I also wanted to share this one here of skeletons. So if you really want to start working on your freehand drawing and getting your proportions right, then you've got to look at the anatomy, of course. And I like this image that just shows, it always fascinates me that the human body, like we're exactly the same as the animals. It was just the way where sort of our bone structure is, and we walk upright, of course. But when you put us down like an animal, walking on all fours, you can really start to see the similarities in our legs and like the ribs and hips and all of that sort of stuff. So especially like say the cat here, how our feet and ankles are. So the cat's foot, how most cats, dogs, all of them, they essentially walk on their toes. So I always think of that as their foot, but it's actually their toes, and then their foot is sort of what sticks up. And then, so if you think of it that way, it is exactly the same as us in the leg structure and just the bone structure in general. So knowing that, I think, can sometimes help you look at the animal a bit easier. So but yeah, it's a good one to keep in mind. And also, yeah, if you're wanting to really learn the drawing freehand, of course. That's important, muscles, bones, all of that. Okay, and so, but in regards to realism, it is the proportion and making sure your initial sketch is right. And like I said, how it's done, totally up to you. I use line art for my smaller work. My larger work, I usually use a scale tool or a projector or a grid. I've been known to use all three. Grids I don't really like because they take so long. For me, the quicker the better. So that's how I do mine. All right, let me check chat again. All right, all good. Luckily my phone's not down here. It's just ringing. I must have left it upstairs. Okay, number 4, color choices. Okay, so using the right color palette is essential to represent the animal accurately, especially in pet portraits or like species specific wildlife art. Like you can push the boundaries like I did on the cow to whatever your unique style is. But if you're wanting to recreate the animal exact and show the different species, or if you're doing a pet portrait commission, 9 times out of 10 your customer wants to look like their pet. So color is really, really important there. And especially for realism, which is what we're talking about. So colors help define the animal's unique characteristics and can also evoke mood and atmosphere. So studying the subtle shifts in color temperature across the animal's fur or feathers, like often fur is not just brown, but it's a blend of warm and cools. So like we were saying before, usually anything in shadows starts to get a cool tone to it. So that's where you sort of maybe will bring in some blues and purples, which I'll show you in a second. Using different shades in your layering can also help, of course, to make it look more lifelike. And then identifying, like I was saying, the midtones before is the local color, they call it, but it's the actual color of the object or animal. And then as the light is hitting it, will change the color and make it lighter. And as it's going into shadows, it will make it darker, of course. And then you've got to also think colors will bounce off from surrounding objects as well. Or like usually, if it's outside, sometimes you'll see I've got a image here of a cow that it's a black cow. So any black animal, actually, usually if they're outside in the sun and that, you'll get a lot of blues happening, which is reflected off the sky. From down below, you might get greens reflected up into the animal as well. Depending on how bright the day is as well will depend how much reflection you get. So just let me share my screen again. Where are we going here? That one. Share. Okay, so this was just a little example of highlights, midtones, and shadows I found on the internet as well. So your shadows, of course, are your really darks, midtones. They're all different levels of highlight. So as you can see, this has been broken into 9. You can't see all of the different levels in the shadows or the highlights, but when we're saying highlights, it's not just white, and shadows aren't just black. Okay, it's all those subtle colors in those lights and darks. And then your midtones, like I was saying, the actual color of the object or the animal. Let me go this way. So this is the cow I was talking about. This was a painting I did of one of our cows, and it's it was early morning. So the sun was just rising, and she was just staring at me. So normally they just look black, but as the sun was hitting her, there was such a brown to her fur or her hair on that right-hand side where the sun was coming up. So it's it wasn't midday sun, so it wasn't as harsh, but it was just that morning sun. And just, it really gave her coat a lot of red and brown to it. So she probably did have, she probably has some reds in the coat maybe. But in general, she looks black most of the time. So this was a really fun one to play with. So you can see on the right is the highlights. So that's where the light is hitting. The midtones are kind of where, like I was saying, it's sort of where the object or the animal is side on to the light source. So it's like the sort of color of the animal. So that was sort of in these areas, sort of where she was facing me. So down the bridge of the nose and that. There were a few little, like, of course, because it's fur, you're going to get bits that's sticking out that are catching light as well. And then the shadows are on the opposite side of where the light is. So, and that's like all your dark areas on the left hand side of her. And that had a lot of blues. So there was a lot of cool tones to it because of the shadows. So I really did push the blues in her. So you might not, in a photo, you probably don't see that as much, but in a painting, as the artist, we can push those more, which you can see I really did here. Like there's a lot of bright blue on that left side, especially above the eye. But it just adds to the painting. And as you when you first look at it, you probably don't notice it that much. But as you sit and study it, you can then start to see those blues are really bright. Purples as well down here in some of the shadows as it goes down into her body. So just think those cool tones on that dark side, on that shadow side. So hold on, I think there was another one here. There was actually, yeah, let me go across. So, and when I was talking about the subtle shifts in color to create realism. So this is a dingo, of course. And dingoes are like a reddy brown. But you can see there's so many different color changes throughout this dingo. And the blend between light and dark, getting those right, really makes it look more realistic. And again, there's not a huge light source, like a really bright light source here. But there's still like the shadows and the darker areas, sort of, which, you know, the middle of its forehead, as they sort of come in and the fur sort of gets closer together and starts to appear darker. You know, in the ears is darker. You know, the lights down the side of sort of the muzzle there. It all helps. They're very subtle, but it helps to give the form to the animal and make it look more realistic. And then, of course, I've really focused on the eyes in this one, because it is such a in-your-face, just a headshot. You need to get focus on a certain area. So the eyes usually is what that is for me. Hold on. And I just wanted to share this other one of the horse eye as well. So you'll see just a lot of really subtle color variations. So there's no hard line. So where it through here, just on the inside of the eye, you just probably can't see my pointer here, sorry. But on the inside of the eye, where it's quite light along that edge as it comes around to the skin of the sort of the head of the horse, and it goes light to really dark, and then it lightens again to a bit of a brown sort of hair. So there's a lot of different shade changes throughout that. Even in the eye, even though, again, there's a lot of detail there, it still looks smooth. And that's sort of achieved because, you know, that green on it is quite a smooth blend. There's no really sharp edges. There's a little bit just in the highlights and on that pupil. But just those, I think that is one of the big things with going from, I'm just going to take this all off again so I can see. Going from a cartoon looking drawing, like we all hate, I get that told all the time. I wish my art didn't look cartoony. And I think all of this plays a part in realism, but I really think also really making sure you're not just blocking in one or two colors. Really, there's a lot of different color changes, and you'll learn as you do more and more of your art, you'll see that in your reference image. When you first start out, it can be really hard to see those subtle changes, but as you get more and more used to looking at reference images and that, you'll start to notice them more. So it gets easier, put it that way, but you've got to put in the work and you've got to put in the hours. All right, so the last technique that I think is really important is your the depth, I suppose, but what I call it is whether it's sharp, in focus, or blurry. Okay, so depth, so the use of that can really help push and pull the viewer's eye as well. So say if you've got a really sharp subject and then you have a softer blurred background, it really helps that feeling of depth, and it will bring the viewer's eye to the focal point. And it's important because that technique, it mimics the way our eyes naturally focus on one area while leaving other areas softer. So it makes the painting feel more immersive and realistic. So I've got one more thing to share, one more picture to share. And this is one we did in my membership, and it was all about composition, really, but this was a good example of having that softer background and the sharp focus. So there was different ways compositionally we have the viewer's eye drawing straight to these flowers. Okay, so but the number one is the sharpness. So this flower in particular right here, and the gum nut that it's protruding from, all of this is as sharp as I could possibly get it. Okay, sharp edges, sharp detail, sharp lines, nice dark in the shadows, all the rest of it. And then as it comes back to those flowers behind it, it starts to get a bit blurrier, not quite as sharp. And that then keeps that eye on that first flower. Same with the leaves. The one on the left here is fairly in focus because it's the one that's kind of as far forward, but I didn't want it, I didn't want it drawing the eye. We still wanted the eye straight on this flower. But as you can see, the leaves get blurrier as the further they go backwards, and that helps to give that depth to it. And then the background is just a really blurry bokeh effect. And then there was other things in play that draw the eye here. So your dark to light contrast. So on that front flower, that right-hand side of the gum nut bit, that's like the brightest point in this whole painting, and it's set against quite a dark background area of the background. So I made sure I had a darker green right against that that lighter area. So the contrast is drawing the eye, the sharpness of it, and also red against green, they're complementary. So that too. So there's all different things to think about when you're creating a composition. Luckily, Mother Nature does a great job of doing that for us. But yeah, but those sharp against blurry edges can really help with that realism as well. So let me stop sharing that again and go back to that. Too many buttons. All right. Okay, so let's just quickly run through so my top 5 most important techniques for realism. So like we had value, then we had texture. Then I might make a little worksheet or something out of this that you could maybe download, because I think this could be quite handy. So value, texture, proportion. What else have we got here? Oh, color. Did I just miss that? Color choices. So, and then number 5 was the sharp versus blurry focus. Okay, so I did have a couple of other well, I did have a couple of other additional ones here, but I've pretty much covered them anyway. So edge control was one. So whether they're hard or soft edges, which will draw the viewer, like in that gumnut flower I was just showing you. And hard edges are great for a focal point, whereas soft edges suggest distance and less important areas. So really keep that in mind when you're creating your own composition. And also edges can make a painting appear more professional, I suppose, because as you get better at art, a lot of artists like to use lost and found edges. So even if you're studying art, a lot of the old masters, as things go around a corner or blend off into the background, there's not even an edge on there. So that's another thing that you might think, if your work appears too cartoony, you've got too many edges. So as we know, a cartoon, usually it's the outline, isn't it? And then we color in inside. So even though we start with a sketch and a line art, some of those edges need to just be lost and blurred off into the background. So no sharp edges on everything. Pick your focal point and pick your areas that you need to be sharper. And then the ones that are, going off. Usually it's as the object curves around, like even on your face, as it comes around, you want that blurred off a bit and lose some edges there. But say the face, where you want the attention, you want some sharper edges there. And then lighting, of course, I mentioned lighting right at the start with the values especially. And it does, lighting kind of impacts everything, because even texture, because depending where the light is will make things appear more textured or less textured as well, of course. And that's like if you've got front lighting or back lighting, whether it's bright midday light, sunny day, it changes the mood and the depth as well. I know I love some of those really moody paintings. So that they're ones that don't have any sort of bright light coming in. And then that goes into your atmosphere as well. So, if you wanted mist over your water, all of that sort of stuff to really help set the scene for the environment that the animal is in. Okay, so there's a lot to think about, of course, but that's why realistic art is quite hard. It's not everyone's cup of tea, because there is a lot to it. There's a lot to learn, and not everyone can do it. So you have to have a lot of patience, and it comes over time. And believe me, you will get better and better and better at it, as long as you put in the hours, but also understand the techniques that will help and make your painting look a bit more realistic. And then it's up to you how realistic you want to go. I call mine are realistic, but they're not hyper realism. And I feel like the more I draw, the less detail I add, if you know what I mean. So again, like with those lost edges and all of that, and I really do try now to just focus my detail onto those main areas that I want the viewer to look at. Whereas when I first started out, I was trying to make every little bit real, like all the hair strokes everywhere, all over the body. Whereas as like the animal's body recedes, and that, of course, you don't really need any hair strokes, just a hint of some. So yeah, you learn as you're going. And yeah, it'll come together. Trust me, just keep at it. Elaine lost alive. Susan, yes, definitely. A worksheet, yeah. Yeah, all right, guys. I'll work on getting a little worksheet just of the points up, and I'll do a blog post from this, and I'll add the worksheet to that. Or you could watch the blog, but if you're in the membership, I'll definitely get a worksheet in there to go along with it. But once I get the blog up, you can just read through again and refresh. But all right. Okay, that is it for today. I did want to mention, I haven't advertised this yet, but I will hopefully get onto that this afternoon. Next week's Tuesday chat, we're going to do a draw along. I'm thinking it's going to be this leopard eye. But bear with me. I'll get the line art and a reference image done up as a little worksheet as well. I'm going to try and get all that done this afternoon. And so that's next week's Tuesday chat. I was thinking, I haven't really drawn any eyes lately, like nice big eyes, and I do love drawing them. So I thought we might do that for a change. So we'll do a draw along. So it probably go hopefully an hour. We could go a bit longer, but we'll go until we finish it. So, okay. But yeah, like I said, I'll let everyone know how they can get that reference image and that once I get it all sorted. So bear with me. But it should be all up and I'll advertise once it's ready. Okay. All right. Thank you everyone for joining me. And I'll see you next Tuesday for our yes, it will be a fun Tuesday, I bet. So yeah, I'll see you next Tuesday for our eye draw along. Okay. See you guys.